Good day to everyone. In this topic, we'll talk about 2.0, design of the site and the dwelling. In the following slides, you will be shown with the following contents. First, we'll talk about the value of space and site analysis. Second, site surveys and the topographic details. Third, site concepts and performance. Fourth, residential sites. And from 5 to 7, codes and regulations for space architecture, structural, electrical, fire, plumbing, and sanitation. As a review, in the previous sessions, we discussed about housing classifications, basing it from the National Building Code of the Philippines. Second, we also talked about basic code requirements for spacing that includes the minimum floor-to-ceiling heights, the minimum volume for air if you do artificial ventilation or if you do natural ventilation. Third, the professional practice in design for the civil engineering profession and the architecture's profession. We also talked about land requirements and lot specifications. And last, dimensions, measurements, and design for your own proposed house. For this topic, we'll talk first about values of space and site analysis. This will cover the following objectives, which includes understanding what drives site planning in residential sites, optimizing the site even with competing values and boundaries, and the science and art of site planning. Shown here is one of the blueprint or floor plan with a site development plan of the most famous House of Falling Waters. You can find a virtual tour of this house over the internet, and you'll notice how architecture can prepare a house to adapt on what is the site, and also vice versa, that the site has already adapted to the house even with a long period of time. In developing your site development plans, which are included for an architectural drawing plan, you need to include the following things. First is their property lines, which should come from your technical lot descriptions. Second, primary structures, which includes fencing, orientation of the gate, or access, and other infrastructures. You should also indicate a north arrow so the client and the approving body will know if your house is oriented to the north, the south, or any other orientation. Next is the scale, as this allows interpretation of the drawing lines that you've drawn and how these are represented in real world. We'll also talk about measurements between major features, especially between natural objects like bodies of water and even greeneries like trees. With good interest from your submissions of the bubble diagrams, I've also included here some points on where to position swimming pools, accessory structures, landscaping, driveway, pathways, shrubs for greeneries, lawns for landscaping, roof lines, and even parking spaces. In one of my projects, I was very lucky enough to work with a locally known architect in the Philippines. And in this housing design, we had to collaborate for us to reorient or recalibrate the design as how it fits on the land. This signifies the importance of a site development plan and how this can affect the design and the overall implementation of the project. In this project, the architect initially designed the house on a flat plane. However, when this was visited for a survey, it turned out that the lot area has a sloping ground. And so, site development plans were very much important to reorient or recalibrate the design as how we see it fit for the land. In that consideration, we also thought about including bioclimatic designs, as this needs to be oriented in proper orientation of the sun. And in bioclimatic design, as can be seen and read in the literature, thick walls or free flow walls with substantial thermal mass can keep the building cooler. Just like in this building from Living ASEAN, you'll notice that columns are built high to allow walls to cover and to resist high winds. It also allows free flow of air, orienting it from the cooler side in this season, and which allows cooler air, not just on the second floor, but also on the first floor of the building. You'll also notice that at this picture that's taken in the building at noontime, the building is properly oriented, and so passive lighting is required. You'll also notice that the sun doesn't hit the habitable zones. Therefore, the bedrooms, the living rooms, and any other part of the house where people would commune are not directly hit by the sun. Another consideration that you need for your design is the use of high open atrium type structure. You'll notice that in large buildings, stairs are directly adjacent to lobbies, just like in the engineering building, or it may have a big atrium, just like the CIT building in Manresa campus. In this orientation, warm air will rise instead of being contained inside the house or inside the building, and there are louvered vents which are located on the roofs or even on the higher walls so that the warm air can flow out instead of in. The use of high open atrium structure, such as in this picture, prevents hot weather or hot air, which can cause warming in the rooms. Deep porches of the south, as you notice here, you install courtyards and pergola to break the heat of the sun. Although we need the sun for passive lighting, we also need to control its heat by using seasonal shading and glazing of the windows. You will find this handy when you want to orient your house and when you want to choose proper design that's fit for the Philippines. In some cases, houses are also oriented to allow cool breezing, such as mentioned before, and also to filter for storms. If you were able to find the high wind parts of the house or in the site, this can allow you to orient your house just like in this example, where the part where the winds are so strong when there are storms, that's the part where the house is built strong, while on the other side, where the wind is not too high, it can be oriented for proper dwelling. You should consider the Philippine Natural Hazard Risk Map generated by OCHA of the United Nations. In this orientation, you'll notice that areas in deep blue are those that may experience higher wind and are frequent path of storms. In that regard, you need to consult with the proper design professionals, whether it's an architect or a structural engineer, so that your house can be built strong and it can withstand the impending winds. The design of the house of allowing cross flow of air is also important. This is why roofs or houses with semi-flat roof is ideal, as this allows louvre design on the wall where winds can flow out instead of in, and proper passive lighting is also accommodated. In this example, you'll notice that louvres or louvers using jalousie windows and sliding windows were implemented. This can be moved when the weather is favorable, and even if the weather is not good enough outside, you can still close them and feel free to enjoy the view, passive lighting, and also cooling breeze of the winds. We've also been able to consider some of the angling of the roofs as how this will shape the overall concept of the design. When Typhoon Yolanda hit Tacloban, there were several studies done to check on what will be the appropriate angle of the roof so that it can be safe from strong winds. They noticed that an 18-degree angle roof is proven not sufficient for super typhoons. As shown here, those roofs that are too flat, less than 18 degrees, most of their cladding or the roofing system were blown off by those strong winds. As compared to roofs with an apex, or those that has a gable roof system of 50-degree angle and even 65-degree angle, are ideal for very bad weather. So, when choosing your design for your roofing, consider this, that if you are to build your house facing the strong wind directions, you need to orient it either 50-degree or with a 65-degree angle. Otherwise, if you choose to build it flat or too low, you will need to project parts of those end roofs with a higher wall so as not to allow your roofing system to be blown away. In one of the studies done by the American Society of Civil Engineers for their study on basic structure system rating of post-Super Typhoon Haiyan structures in Tacloban and East Giwan, Samar, they noticed that wind damage dominated the major cause of failures. That's quite big at 53%. And what they noticed is that majority of these buildings, whether it's low rise or high rise, were damaged by winds, especially because their roofs were not oriented properly, were not designed properly, and it doesn't have protecting mechanisms for it not to be blown by the winds. So, if you are to project your house like this one in the picture, you need to be very careful on the angling requirements, whether it's 50, 65, or 18 degrees, and even some of the protective mechanisms, such as a high wall, or even building your roof close enough to the wall. I also had one project in Lanao del Sur where I had to orient a house by using the natural cool breeze. And when I say cool breeze, in this system, this is 80 to 20 degrees centigrade. That's almost like you have a free air conditioning system. So the design was for an office or rest house with a monoslope roofing. And you'll notice in this orientation, in this graphic detail, cool winds were properly adapted for the building. So the southern part, though it's facing the sunset, it may come warm in the afternoon, but because the area is quite cool enough, the maximum temperature that you'll get is at 20 degrees or even 25 degrees during summer, and you occasionally have fogs crossing the landscape. And so you can try to design the building to project near the cool winds. And proper orientation was considered here, such that there's no need for artificial lighting, okay? And that the walls were made of brick, as this is the color of the land, that area. You'll notice in this picture, in this Google Earth image, that when the road was constructed, it's all red. And for the house to adapt to that color, you need to use brick as my cladding system so that the house can readily adapt to what it's built on. You may also consider adding porches and decks in your house designs. This allows an area where your owners or residents can rest during the hot afternoons. And in the Filipino culture, we often go out when it's 3 p.m. to whether enjoy our snack time or with a hot coffee. And it's good that you have porches and decks, whether it's on the ground or on the second floor, to allow um, resting or an area for accommodating guests, or even just to enjoy the view. You may also include greeneries by reducing paving with space for more of your ornamentations, or if you're a plantito or plantita, you can enjoy the view. Now, this come as a cost, but in the Philippines, we can do this through a progressive type of housing. So you can build the house first, and then later you can improve on the landscaping. These pictures shown are from the Villa Marina in Cubao, and the other one is a picture of a house near the capital in Metro Manila. And because the temperature there is quite hot, they were able to design the structure, or not just the structure, but also the site by designing where the plants are located, where you can position trees, where you can put ornaments, will benefit the house and for a positive psychological view of the owner. You may also include grading and site water management. That includes building on slopes and not over excavation, as this will allow you to build it free from flood, and also for water management. In some countries, houses are allowed and required to have green zones with a certain percentage from the lot that they own before they got approved for their building permits. And the values range from 10 to 20% per land. So you are required to build green zones in your house, whether it's on the roof, like in this lower picture, or on your ground floor by allowing water to just flow into your pavement or crevices, or even by building green landscapes. As history repeats itself, we should also design our houses or settlements in general away from hazard zones. In the study, a retrospective on the devastating impacts of Tropical Storm Washi, they were able to conclude that the encroachment in the sandbars and the riverbanks due to urbanization and unabated development impeded the flow of water, resulting to greater damage. And so site planning is quite important for you to properly situate your structure or your proposed home design away from these hazards, so that when flooding comes, the structure that you're building rather, or proposing, will not be subjected to flooding. Landscape and shading is also an important tool that you need to integrate in your site development plans, as this allows cooler temperatures and also a positive disposition of your owner. There's also the thing called heat island effect. And both studies point to that when an area is built with too much concrete, steel, and even clearing it from all the vegetation, urban heat island effect occurs. And so you can design actually your house by adding green details, such as in this part, they've added ornamentations on the second floor and on the veranda, and even installed solar panels to absorb the heat of the sun and use it for other purposes. This was the case of this house in Singapore. And by the way, I'll be uploading this presentation, and you can access the links of these pictures, which can be used for your improved design for your homes. You may also adapt acoustical and visual buffers, especially if you're in an urban zone. So these trellis don't have just aesthetic value. They actually allow light, sound, and heat to be filtered before it gets into your house. So the trellis system will filter the smoke. It can also filter some of the sound which could be circulating around the area, or the noise pollution. So in urban areas where it's too loud from the local traffic, perhaps, trellis system is quite beneficial. There's also a comeback of this old concept in the Philippines called the Bahay Kubo concept. The Bahay Kubo concept doesn't just adapt to the land, but also considers some of the ancient, well, um, cultural and religious practices that we adapted into our home designs. The main value of the Bahay Kubo system is that it is passively cooled. It's built on stilt, so there's no need for much excavation. It uses sustainable materials for sustainable environment. And because the design is for a family, the concept of open spacing, that means that there are lesser walls or division walls inside, is a highly prized item for this design. As can be shown in this Bahay Kubo concept, you'll notice that most of the materials were native or organic. They used bamboo. They used the patterns of the native patterns of triangular patterns. And also because this adapted to the open space outside, you'll notice that windows are installed and they can be readily closed when it becomes or when high winds are threatening the zone. You can also check this tiny house design, which gives a modern take on the Bahay Kubo concept. This is a very small house, less than 100 square meters, and it has really adapted the concept of a Bahay Kubo. You'll notice some parts of the house are built on steel in this part, in the bottom, and that the overall flow of air is already adapted. You'll see that there are trellis system on the walls and on the upper walls next to the roof, so it doesn't contain much of the heat. Instead, it just goes out. And the benefit also of building small is quite ideal for Filipino houses, especially that the average family size now is smaller compared to what it was before. There's also this modern take on tropical and Bahay Kubo concept. Again, you may access the links at the bottom in the PDF version of this presentation. When you have to build on still, as you want it to adapt on the site or in the location, you need to consider some factors of economics, factors of ventilation, and perhaps factors on adding a parkway for your vehicles. In an on-stilt system, you are free to use whatever you want on the first floor, and all habitable rooms are much located on the second floor. This allows free flow of air and also the space requirements, which are very elegant for a tropical housing. You may also utilize windows that are movable, such as a sliding window or a jalousie window, which could adapt to the scene. As you noticed here, the windows are clear so that any time of the day, the client or the owner of the house can enjoy the view outside. And when it gets too hot inside, they can just open the window and pop good air comes in. So you'll notice here that the idea of architecture and even the design is not really that scientific. You may use them to adapt your design, but what to choose from all of these design examples depends on you. And so I invite everyone to watch this video and this interview of the different architects and pose a question that, so what is architecture, especially in home design, and should we embrace it? And I want you to uncover this question, seeking to uncover their opinion on what architecture is and what it can do for your proposed designs. That's all. You may check the references in the uploaded text in your e-learn pages, and I hope to see your improved designs in the coming synchronous sessions. Thank you.